Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar, The Secret Sauce Modern Learning Delivery Playbook. Today I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Ben Keir. Ben heads GP Strategies Australia and Southeast Asia business. He also spearheads modern learning transformation services and our leadership development practice in APAC. With that, Ben, I'm going to let you take it from here. Over to you.
Thank you, Zach. And I've got my webcam on, so nice to see. I'm looking through the participants. We've got about 30 folks on. I can see some familiar names. I can see some new names. Interestingly, I think of all the webinar invites we've done around this kind of education around modern learning, this was probably the webinar we got the most. If we register, can we still get the recording? Because I can't make the call. You know, a lot of like urgent requests about that. So clearly this is an important topic, and I'm really excited to talk through it today, because we've done a whole series of webinars. Those of you who have joined earlier webinars will have seen us focus on different aspects of modern learning design, especially the design aspect of it. Because honestly, that's where the magic happens. You know, you've got to design it for success. But what we realized is we haven't really done a webinar that has specifically called out the secret sauce. You know, what after you've designed it, what does it take to actually deliver it? What does it look like once you've done all the hard work? And then how do I actually deliver? How do I actually make sure I'm using all the different elements that I've considered and thought about to engage, to drive completion, to drive participation, to drive action on the job? And so it really is where the rubber meets the road. And to be frank, it was a difficult webinar to design for, because there really is some secret sauce in what I think our team does, you know, in Singapore and Australia. And so it's how much do I talk about and how much do I hold back? So, you know, there's a bit of transparency for you. So I want to call out that this event is being recorded. We will be using the chat, and make sure when you are using the chat, you've selected to everyone. In fact, let's give that a try right now. Could everyone just type in the chat, how are you today? I'm going to do the same thing. I'm feeling excellent, just so we all know where the chat is. Okay, we got Kwong Chan feeling fantastic. We got people feeling great, amazing. We got smiley faces. We got very good, doing well is a very measured response from Wes. Okay, good. Yeah, so we've all found the chat. Occasionally, I'm going to be asking you guys to find the chat and use it. The other thing we'll be using is Mentimeter. And so Mentimeter will be used for some interactions with each other, and it'll also be used for the Q&A. So I'm going to bring that up right now. So you guys can scan this QR code with your phone, or you can open up another browser window if you want. I think the experience is best on the phone, because then you can have two different screens. You don't have to toggle. But join on, and when you've accessed Mentimeter, please make sure that you guys are, I'm just going to bring it up. Make sure you give me a little heart symbol to tell me that you're on. I can see we've got 2 hearts, 3 hearts, 4 hearts. I want to see that number going up. 5, it's still going up. So while you guys are all showing me your love, I would like to also call out here that you have access to a Q&A throughout in Menti. And so anytime a question comes up, you can write it down. Now, I can't guarantee we're going to get to every question, because I tend to talk too much, but I will endeavor to try to address. We've got a chunk of time for questions at the end, and I'll look through them all piece by piece as we go through. And anything we can't get to, we'll make sure we find a way to get you those answers. So I can see a lot of you are on. Please make sure you've logged on. There'll be other opportunities to log on later, but do make sure that you have found your Menti, because I want to hear from you. I don't want this to be a passive experience. In fact, we're going to use Menti right now. So if you haven't actually logged on to Menti yet, then do so now. I'm going to change slides here in a second. So what I'm going to ask you guys is, I'm going to actually give you 2 different questions, and you're going to have to rank the answers. which of these helps most today? So you're gonna have to rank them from most to least. It's not very scientific. Don't ponder over it for 20 minutes because we don't have that much time. It's just your gut reaction. And so you're really gonna see a couple of different questions. So the first question we're gonna look at is, let me just move ahead here. Which of these helps most with engagement, right? So you're just going to rank these that's relative to each other. You got gamification, social learning, virtual training, access to the learning anywhere, the fact that it's maybe micro learning, spacing learning over time, classroom training, putting learning into a classroom. And I might, we notice I've got virtual training and classroom training is their own separate items. And finally, discipline and penalties, because you know me, I'm an ex-prison guard. I'm not really, I'm just kidding. But I do know that discipline and penalties can be a part of any learning organization. So go ahead and just start that ranking. Hopefully my GP team can confirm. Oh, here we go. It's all coming up. Great, great, great. All right, so things that help most with engagement, we've got discipline and planning kind of at the bottom. We've got classroom training shooting towards the top. Gamification, yeah, we've got a bit of rotation coming up here. This is really interesting, and I'm just going to give a bit more time because I want to hear from everybody. Make sure you do. If you miss the QR code, you can still log in by going to menti.com and typing in that code 52783890. All right, we're starting to see some things emerge here. So it looks like still a little bit more information coming in. Keep it coming. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds or so. So I think we can see pretty much at the top a trend emerging, right? It's a tussle at the top between classroom training and gamification, with gamification just edging a little bit here. And what's interesting about that is the way that we sometimes can view engagement through a certain lens. And one of the things that I'm going to challenge you guys on today is that engagement is much broader than an act or an action or a tool, and so we're going to challenge that. And I'm going to flip the question. I'm going to give you the same items. I haven't changed it yet. I'm going to give you the exact same list of items, but I'm going to change the question. So I'm going to move from which helps with engagement to which of these helps most with on-the-job application and long-term retention, right? So application on the job and retaining knowledge or skills over a long period of time. Go ahead and rank. Which contributes most to that? Rank away. I should have some of that climbing a mountain, Braveheart music playing here, but that's too cumbersome for me right now, so I apologize. We should see some results coming in a second. All right. Interesting what we've got coming up here. I'm not going to comment yet because I know it's going to take a little bit of time for some responses. So far, we've got 8 people have responded, 9. Still getting that to come up, 10 responses. I'm going to try to respond when I get to I'm going to start commenting when I get to about 20. So keep those responses coming in. Now, ideally, we'd have like 150 people on this call and we'd get a bit more of a meaningful statistical analysis of a wide swathe. But unfortunately, we've got 30 people on. So, so that still should give us a little insight. So we're seeing some trends emerge, a couple more responses. I'm going to give it just another minute or so for everyone to take their time to respond. Good, we got 15, 16 coming in. So isn't it interesting, though, what's happening here? I don't know if you guys can tell me in the chat. What's changing here? What are we seeing? Like, what is the thing that was at the top that's dropped down the rankings a little bit? Can anyone tell me in the chat, what are you seeing change between driving engagement versus driving application and retention? Yeah, gamification has plummeted. Thanks, Tim. What else do you guys see? Yeah. What else? Thank you, Teresa. I can see gamification. Something else has dropped that was also at the top along with gamification. What is that, guys? Tell me in the chat. Live classroom. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. And I'm glad to see that because we have to recognize, like, we think this is the dichotomy. This is the kind of inherent tension in our minds as L&D practitioners or designers or developers or delivery people. is we tend to go, oh, we really want to drive engagement, we better do a classroom, right? And during it's interesting. So Kwong Chan has said gamification is fun, but not necessarily contributes to application. I'm going to challenge that a little bit. Generally speaking, I would agree with you, but when we look at engagement and design as a holistic package rather than individual tools, we'll start to see all this come together. But it is a good point. But what I was going to call out here is we often lean on classroom, and right now after COVID is, well, whatever it is, it's not quite over, but people are trying to say, okay, we want to revert back to normal. A lot of large corporates that I work with, and they're saying this course that we've developed that's primarily digital or social or space, can we kind of start pivoting back to classroom? And that's because when people think engagement, they think classroom, right? But when I flip it on its head and I say application and retention, look where classroom has dropped, right? It's dropped much further down the list here, right? And what's boosted up is social learning, because we know that people inherently learn from each other. We know that I need learning to be accessible whenever I need it. I know that, well, we'll talk about micro-learning, but micro-learning, it's easy to remember and consume stuff when I can consume it in smaller chunks, so it helps with my retention. Access to a SME as well. When can I access that SME when I have questions? And interestingly, spacing learning over time, something I would say is probably the number one factor that influences retention, is somewhere down with classroom and gamification. And I'm glad we all agree discipline and penalties don't help with retention and application that much. So look, a little interesting activity here, and I want you to remember this data, right? From the prior question where we had engagement, which had classroom and gamification at the top. And then now here we've kind of flipped it on its head, and I think Kwong Chan had an interesting point there around gamification. Let's see as we go through. So I'm going to do a quick summary here, because some of you might have attended prior webinars, some of you might haven't. Why are we talking about this? Well, due to pressures of digitization, automation, the need to upskill and reskill our workforce, we need learning that is more agile, more scalable, more engaging. It has to be more effective as well. Learning can no longer just be a box ticking exercise that I get assessed on, did people attend it or not attend it? It needs to actually be effective, because how can I meaningfully upskill and prepare my workforce for changes and disruption in the future if the learning part of it, and learning is only a part of it, is not very effective, right? And so that's why I was asking that question about retention and engagement. So, so we've spoken a bit about that. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And I do want to talk a bit about technology, because if you're going to do social learning and do it well, if you're going to leverage gamification, if you're going to bridge classroom training with other types of learning, you're going to need to lean on technology. It's just a fact. But there are two major challenges with technology, and this really feeds into our secret sauce playbook for today. And number one is that the number one problem or challenge with technology is that companies are all searching for the one ring to rule them all. Forgive me to geek out. I love Lord of the Rings, but the reality is, let me just reveal here the learning landscape. This is the learning environment that people are trying to find that one ring. The expression "a needle in a haystack" comes to mind, right? So we're out there and we end up trying to buy the shiny thing, or we rush to a decision, and then that decision directly affects our ability to do that engagement, to do that retention, to do that transfer. And whatever technology you end up choosing, and whatever modalities of learning, so modalities are just the way I experience learning, could be classroom, it could be online, it could be through social or peer-to-peer or coaching, and then the technology that enables it and links it together. Whatever I choose informs my playbook, my delivery playbook. So we've got to talk about that. And so just quickly on technology, the challenge with technology is all technologies, right? If you're in a startup and you want to build a learning technology, you've basically got a core use case. Everyone has a vision in their mind that I want to create a technology for this. And that technology, whatever it is, whether it's an LMS or a curation platform like Degreed, or a spaced social cohort learning experience platform like Intrepid, or a video-based kind of really great at driving sales and skills and in-time searchable content like a Lego, or whatever technology you use, they're usually very good at their core use case. They can kind of do some other stuff to the left and right of that use case. And then very rapidly, they get not good at things very quickly. But when you're on the phone to a lot of technology providers, You say, can you do this? Can you do that? And the answer is inevitably, yeah, we can do it all, right? But this is the truth of technology. Of all technologies, there's generally a very good use case. This is changing a little bit. That triangle is getting flatter and wider as acquisitions occur. And like I know, like Cornerstone bought edX, Edcast. And so, you know, there's some changes happening, but generally speaking, this is how technology works. Problem number two, and this is really going to zero into our problem today that we're trying to solve. People think technology is the answer. But much like tools, you need to find the right tool for the right job. So you got to know what your business needs, what type of learning you're trying to address, what types of business problems you're trying to solve. What's your current culture of people? I hate learning. I hate digital. Everything you give me has been boring. Or are people hungry for it and they love it? You got to consider that and pick the right tool for the job. But also, it's not what you use, it's how you use it. So you can have the coolest technology to augment your learning, but if you don't really know how to use it or don't use it well, then you end up, well, doing what's going on in the picture here. So let's do our next little poll, you know, just to kind of zero in on attitude. What attitude does the average learner have towards digital learning at work? So I'm going to jump ahead here and bring up that next poll. So go ahead and tell me, give me a poll, your responses here. Go ahead. Is it repetitive, mandatory, boring, or exciting, engaging, love it? So the average learner, I'm not looking for like your best use case, that one trial we ran that went really well. The average learner. Yeah, look, I don't even need to see the responses to see that there's a trend. I'm glad that some people are saying exciting, engaging, love it, because that means there's some love and heart going into the design of that. But generally speaking, historically, the way that e-learning has been deployed, or the limitations of digital learning up until the last 4 or 5 years, have created repetitive, mandatory, boring training. And it's also companies have chosen to use digital in a way to broadcast things that are not that exciting and interesting, like our compliance training or our safety training. Even though it's critical, we tend to blast it out like that. So look, this is absolutely right. And so this kind of points us to, you know, why we're really here today. So I'm toggling back. So we need to build learning that integrates all the modalities of learning. If we're going to overcome these challenges, we want to have learning that brings everything together, not just classroom or not just digital, but uses digital, bring all of the modalities of learning, including social learning, including peer-to-peer learning, including an interaction between a manager and a team member on the job, including gamification, including all this stuff, videos, assets, assessments, one-on-one coaching. We want to bring all of that together. And so inherently what that translates to is an environment where learning becomes increasingly self-led. It's increasingly continuous. It's not event-based, it's continuous. It's increasingly micro-learning, and it's increasingly spaced over time, right? This is the trajectory of learning. And so how do we design to make this happen? What is the blueprint, right? This is that was just our introduction, our setup. Well, I'm going to model the rest of our presentation, the rest of our discussion today around the critical success criteria that if you've been on webinars or you work with us as a customer, you know that you will have heard me harp on about a lot. Number one, to make this type of learning successful, it's got to be ruthless relevant. It's got to create connections. It's got to respect time, and it's got to generate pull, and it's going to collect data. So in the past, I've just kind of stopped there and I've maybe zoomed into ruthless relevance. But what I'm actually going to do today is we're going to dive into each one of them bit by bit by exploring the secret sauce. And I'm going to actually be modeling this. I'm going to be showing you this through a program that we've designed that has what we believe are many of the factors, the secret sauce that actually makes these learnings successful. I've asked in previous cohorts and previous companies, you know, what's stopping you from doing, you know, self-led, self-directed, continuous, spaced over time learning? And the number 1 and 2 answers have always been, we build it and no one comes, and it takes a hell of a lot of effort to engage people. And that's because some elements of the secret sauce are missing. So let's delve in. So we're going to break this down, as I said, around ruthless relevance, creating connections, respecting time, generating pull, and collecting data. And because I can't show you our customers' experiences, I'm actually going to show you one of GP's experience. So I'm not selling this journey. In fact, we haven't even launched it yet. My team and I have been spending the last 4 months building a program called Career Now, because we see there's this need for people to be able to access career en masse at scale and be able to start to figure that out for themselves because of the, the great resignation, because of this question mark about what is a career, what is a job in the world of remote work, and as organizations become flatter. So we will be launching a public version of this program. I'm going to be trying to show you the case study in September. Again, not so much to experience the content, great. It's great that it's career, but we want people to actually experience what we would call modern learning for yourselves. Anyway, there'll be more about that later, and I wanted to just get that out of the way. So let's jump in to our first point, ruthless relevance. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of bullet points, and then I'm going to show you how we do these things. So number one, secret source of ruthless relevance is you've got to determine a powerful why, right? For learners, and this is just based on simple adult learning theory, especially adults learn not when they're told to learn, but when they want to learn. And the things that trigger a desire to learn in all adults, or in most adults, is when they perceive urgency and immediacy in application. I need this now, I'm going to use it now, and so therefore I'm ready to learn it. And so the whys need to drive that urgency, right? We're going to talk a little bit about those whys in a little case study. You got to build learner personas. You got to know who these learners are, because how on earth am I going to know what relevance is if I don't know who these learners are, let alone creating connections, or how much time they have, or how to generate pull, or what those whys are, right? And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. You have to engage in something I call the spiral of relevance. And it's a difficult thing to describe, but I'm going to show you how, when we design content on a page, what is the spiral of relevance? You need to integrate voices from the business. It can't be some third-party vendor's voice, right? If I'm going to be relevant, it's got to be grounded in the realities, the language, the vocabulary of the business, but also how can I actually bring those voices to life in any learning? And you've got to create space for the learner to insert their reality, right? This is just a few elements of the art of ruthless relevance. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to break that down into a few sections. So number one, the best way to build ruthless relevance is through learner-centric design, right? And so I'm just going to touch on this. We use design thinking. We remodeled the core functionality of design thinking to support the development of modern learning experiences. So empathize, make sure you're not just focusing on the learners, but also on the business, because you want to know what that current culture is, what type of resistance you may encounter. You want to understand as much about the business, where it is today and where it wants to go culturally, what its business, what its urgent factors are, what's going on in the industry. You want to understand that, because that's going to help inform our powerful whys. It's going to inform some other stuff I'll talk about later. You want to understand the learners. You want to understand the business needs and the challenges. Once I've understand that, I want to then use that data to start to define the experience, right? Maybe start to define, okay, what technology is a good fit based on this business and learner profile? What are the moments of learning these learners need to capture this learning? Is it just one moment of learning need, or multiple? And how can I support that? What technology will support that? What are the problems that we might need to solve along the way? So you might start an initiative in learning with no problems. But then as you start to realize what it's going to take to build for these learners and this business situation, all of a sudden new problems emerge. What are the do's and don'ts? We do work in the automotive space. We did a big study on chatbots, so AI-driven chatbots for a large American automotive the retail part of an automotive business in the US. And one of the things we learned straight away is do not have the chatbot connect with people on weekends. Right, that was like a big thing. So we quickly made that change. Right, there were some do's and don'ts that emerged. How much time do they have? How much? Where will they like to access learning? What device do they like to use? Things like that. And then measurement. How are we going to measure it? And we're going to talk about that later. From there, you ideate. You bring all that together, figure out what could this journey look like, and you start to design it, build it, test it, launch it, and iterate it. It's in a cycle, right? So that's kind of step one. But what that really culminates in is, I'm going to bring up a PDF here. I'm going to show you an example of a real it's a very abridged version of a high-level design, a document that we might produce once we've captured and synthesized all that data. So I've stripped out a lot of customer information here, but we might first of all define what are the big whys at a company level that is driving this experience, because what we're often told by a customer is the why is, develop these competencies, or we need to build these skills, right? But the actual why behind those competencies and why they even exist is often not communicated up front. So we need to establish that. And sometimes that comes from the senior leadership team, right? We need to be able to, here's the powerful whys that are driven by the learners. So this was for a banking client, right? There's a lot of disruption affecting banking. People are freaking out about it. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about how they're going to perform, what skills they might need today and tomorrow as jobs get automated and digitization continues to take hold and fintech disrupts them. And so what that means is what got you here won't take you there. So now when I know that, I'm building my content with messaging in to kind of lean on this fear and motivator, right? I want to have that packaged into my content. It influences my spiral of why that I'll come to later. We learned in this organization that when we interviewed the learners, that some learners were very motivated and were very ambitious. They were like, I want my manager's job. I want to be the next CEO. They wanted to develop. Others in that same population, about 40% of them, weren't really that ambitious. They were very content where they were today. And so if I build a course that's all about, this is going to help you tomorrow, this is going to help you tomorrow, 40% of learners won't be hooked by that and therefore be slightly less motivated to want to participate in the journey. So we had to package all of the experience around how it's going to help me today and how it's going to help me tomorrow. In this case, there was a lot of resistance to learning, and that this group had never received professional development before. All their learning was compliance training and systems training. And so we needed to overcome that inertia. They saw digital as dirty. So we had to say, hey, first of all, we care about you. The bank cares about you. We see you as leaders. This is an investment in you. This is not like the other stuff that you had. This is totally for you. You're the future. We can't achieve this without you. We're in this together. It's designed for you. We're not just designing it in this way because of COVID or whatever. We're designing this because we respect that you're busy. We respect that you need learning when and where you're applying your job, not in a classroom, So all of this is change management elements, and we had to establish that through the needs analysis. We build out word clouds of the key themes that come out of our interviews. So career, for example, when I looked at all the interviews of managers, the learners, managers, senior leaders, and learning stakeholders, one way or another, the word career was coming up a lot, right? Either I'm not having enough of it, or I'm nervous to speak to my manager about it, or my manager's like, I don't have a succession plan in place because my people aren't stepping up, but career was a big one. The client didn't even mention career in their design. So we knew that these themes would have to go and sit on top of the competencies that they gave us, right? We go and we build these personas, and these personas define the northeast, southwest of the compass points of an audience, and we use them as measuring sticks as we're designing, so we can be confident, are we really hitting the note? So when we launch, we've almost already prototyped and tested. So that's kind of like the first step one of relevance. The next step of relevance is we have to go into the program to see that. So I'm going to load up here. So this platform is called Intrepid. GP, or my team, we use Intrepid to basically replace traditional classroom learning for leadership development, professional development. Classroom can still be a part of these journeys, but now this is the backbone for a whole bunch of reasons which you'll learn about throughout this journey. So you can see I've earned my first badge has come up. I've just come up here. I've got some notifications. I've got my whole team in GP to participate in this, so it looks like it's a living and breathing course. People have replied to my post. I can see it's like Facebook or something like that. There's notifications, so that's there for me to review. I can click and jump on that. I can see I've got my points progress. There's a live event that I can explore. So this is Intrepid. We use it for a very specific use case, and I'll jump into the actual learning. We use it because we can bring a cohort together like what you have in a classroom, right? And we can basically space learning. We can bring this cohort together to explore learning by themselves in a self-directed way, yet be social and connected. And I can also space that learning over time. So I don't flood them with knowledge in 2 hours, 3 days of learning or 2 days of learning or a half-day virtual training. I'm giving them space to explore and unpack things week by week. So I'm an admin, so I can see all the weeks. But if you were a learner, you'd only see the start week, and then week 1 would release, and then week 2 would release, and week 3 would release. So we can control the flow of learning, right? We're already seeing some of those things, respecting time. But what I want to really zoom into is the spiral. I'm going to zoom out a bit here, the spiral of relevance. I'm going to go into week 2, for example. So the spiral of relevance kind of was mirrored on what I'm seeing for this experience for Intrepid. And I imagine you start at the top here with a spiral. That's the first thing a learner is going to see. And so if I got to be relevant, I need something here that's going to be like, hey, guys, this is urgent. You need to pay attention to this. And also, it's not just urgent, it's relevant. This is not just some learning off the shelf. This is something from our company. There's some relevance here. So I might put a leader or another learner telling a story of, why knowing, having self-awareness. That's what this week is about, knowing your identity, your self-awareness piece. Why that's so critical or how that helped them. I want something that hooks people in at the top, right? So I'm going to go down with that spiral down the bottom. And I want to kind of make sure I've ended it, right? I've bookended it with really relevant and interesting information. And then as I unpack and explore this week, as the spiral goes in, each beginning of each accordion, these are called accordions, must also start with those powerful whys. So maybe I use a quote. Maybe when I open this video, this first thing will be something that really hits not just values, which is what this accordion is about, but how those values connect to those whys that I mentioned earlier, about career, about performing today, growing tomorrow, about why I'm going to be freaked out if I don't have a career tomorrow because my job got automated away. So, and as I spiral in more and more and I get into the content, I want to embed the actual whys and I want to embed the flow of the learning into the text and into the mission and into the activities. So this is kind of what I mean by the spiral of whys. It's not enough to just have someone mention something at the start of a classroom session or at the start of a digital journey. The best design, if you want ruthless relevance, is to embed the powerful whys, the business case, the urgency, the what got you here won't take you there, from the top to the bottom, on either end, and right into the middle, right into the content. So that's the spiral of why that I wanted to bring to life for you. And I'm just going to jump back here. So that's ruthless relevance. And the other thing that we spoke about is we mentioned voices for the business. Well, that's getting business leaders in or people who learners know about, getting other learners in to insert their voice into their pre-record it, get a video, get it in there to share stories. But this is an interesting one. Create space for the learner to insert their reality. That experience that you just saw that I'm going to toggle back to in a moment, we could have up to 500 people or 300 people in that at one time. So how do you create relevancy for 300 people with different roles, different expectations? Well, maybe we might put an assessment in so people uncover some unique data about themselves. But we also create space where people can discuss, where people can go and do something on the job and come back and tell us how it went. So we try to design it so there's enough why to hook me into what I'm learning, but enough space for me to go out and apply it and put it into my context and come back and reflect on it. Right. And so that's what I mean by creating space. And you'll see that in here we have a section on growth mindset and fixed mindset. Right. So I've done a little assessment up front to test, do I have a fixed or a growth mindset? Right. We built this just in HTML5 with like a GQ magazine thing. Right. So that piece is here. And sorry, it's just going to come up. I'll show you an example. So that gives me a little bit of context about myself. Right. But then after that, I'm watch a video. And then I have a quiz, and then I have a discussion where I can share, and I have a mission where I can actually go and apply growth or fixed mindset to myself, right? And so that's what I mean about creating space to apply. You can't do that in a classroom because you're locked in the classroom. How do I then drive that space on the job if I don't have something that supports it? So that's really what we're talking about, some examples of how you bring ruthless relevance to life. When it comes to creating connections, and I'm going to accelerate a bit here, self-directed but together. So that journey that I'm showing you, it is a self-directed experience, right? So I'm going to zoom back in here. This is something that I'm moving through in my own pace, but hey, guess what? I'm also connected. I get to introduce myself to the team through a little mission here, and I get to like and comment. Here are some introductions. Here's me introducing myself. And I get to look at other people's missions. I get to collaborate as a team. Here I've created what we call a crew, where I'm not just by myself, I'm also with 6, 7, 8 other members who are also participating in this. We have a chat area, and we actually have a project here, which is an activity where they get to actually come up with their own crew charter, how they're going to support each other. They're going to set up a WhatsApp group or a WeChat group. How are we actually going to connect and collaborate? So we've got all of these different team spaces to collaborate. There's discussions throughout. There's a place to ask questions. I'm going to zoom into some questions here, right? I can ask questions every week. So here is the weekly questions, the things I'm not getting answered. And look here, Neith has asked a great question about, look, I've read all of this, but I'm still not sure how I can be open to change. And let's have a look at what's happened here. So different learners have participated in this with each other. So I've responded to Neith as a learner. Neith has responded to me, right? So I'm self-directed, but I'm also together. And this is what we're referring to here. Creating space for discussions. Well, I've just shown you some examples for that. How you put where you put the discussions and how you place the discussions matters, what they're about, how you see them. Cohorts within cohorts. So out of that 300 I just showed you, let's break. Now, some platforms don't support mini cohorts within a larger cohort, right? Intrepid didn't used to. They added that after we requested it for about 12 months. So what we used to do and what we do now through the system is that we'd manually map a cohort of 200 into groups of 6 or 8, and we'd integrate that into the kickoff. We might have a live kickoff in a classroom or virtually where people connect with each other. They share each other's phone numbers. They connect, because I don't want to just, for example, talk about the power of network in career. I want people to build an actual career network in the course. I want them to live it, right? And so we have individual self-directed leaderboard, but we also have a cohort leaderboard that we email them in. And I can see questions are coming in, so that's fine. Cohorts within cohorts. We consider still using, of course, live classroom and virtual training. Why not? Where it makes sense, because classroom training has limitations because it's so fixed in its schedule, and virtual training is slightly less fixed because it's virtual, right? But if it makes sense and it feel like it's going to add value to either engagement, retention, and transfer, let's do it. So that program I'm just showing you, you'll notice has a live events page, right? And so we have strategically decided that actually, I'm just going to jump ahead here to week 5. In week 5, this career program builds towards preparing for a conversation with your manager to help align on all the data and things that you've uncovered on weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so we can put reminders in, and we can put activities in. Here's the reminder here, right? Here, that should be in week 5. I thought I put it in there, but it would appear on the week that's there. And so I can integrate live events, and that's fine. So no one's saying get rid of classroom or live, but use it, because I think people will need help to prepare for those conversations. That's when a facilitator is needed. So I'm going to put one in there, and it's virtual in that instance. Connections through narrative and flow. So it's not just people connections, it's actually connections to the content. And so I'm toggling back here. There is a flow to this design. So from the start week, I'm starting to do a self-assessment about what I think is important for me today and how effective I'm asking my manager for their input on skills for now and for the future. I'm starting that process, and I'm building on it here, where I get to explore what's needed from me in the face of disruption and change to thrive. And here I'm looking at who I am, and I'm looking at what I've assessed myself on, and really going deeper into my values and my strengths and my goals. And now here I'm looking at what I'm worried about into the future, what I need to be resilient for. How can I have a community that's going to help me in my career? And then here I'm talking about how can I be resilient to changes as things come my way? How can I assess things and anticipate and look for opportunities and be prepared? And then here I'm going to go and have that conversation about all those things I've been building towards, right? So there's a flow here, and the content has a narrative, and it's connected, so it helps to build connections. So the big thing I'm getting across there is it's not just people that connections, the content needs to connect. And SMEs and moderators, right? This is a really big piece as well. So we have on these experiences, live people who engage, right? So connect with the experience here. There'll be a leadership SME in these journeys, right? I think I'll be the leadership SME for this public run, but we bring in our facilitators, and what they do is they run the virtual sessions, but they comment and respond and answer questions and look at your missions and push, probe you to go further, right? And your moderator, right? In this case, you've got Cress here. So Cress's job is to look at the points. What are people doing? Are people on or not on? Why are they not on? They look at the data, but they also send emails. I'm just going to bring up an example of a couple of emails, right? So here is an example of a start strong email. So maybe the next week of content is launched, a little email comes out, because guess what? You may not actually be on the platform yet. So if you're not on the platform, how are you getting points? How are you getting the notifications? So we're going to engage you outside of the platform, right? And so I'm going to let you know what's coming up. And not just that, at the end of the week, I'm going to send you an email called a Finish Strong email, where I'm actually curating things from the platform, cool things people have said or videos they've posted. And I'm saying, check what these other learners like you are doing. And what that does is an extra layer that pulls people back in into the experience, right? And so that's a Finish Strong email. The moderator is doing that and verifying those things. But they're also in here. I'm going to go into the weekly questions. Hopefully we've got some moderated questions in here. Okay, so Mavis has written the comment, and look, here's Cress coming in. Great question. So she's coming in and responding, and I can tell you nothing's cooler when you're participating in an experience like this than when someone responds to you and you go, wow, someone's here with me. It feels great, right? And so that's what we're talking about, create connections. This is all secret sauce. And connections back to the job. So that kind of circles back to what I was talking about. You need a way to make people take action on the job and reflect on the results, the success or failures that they might have. Respecting time, I'm going to go pretty quick. You got to space it over time. Here we're spacing it over a weekly basis. That could be fortnightly. That could be monthly. The analysis up the top when we do our personas and empathy phase defines that. How do we chunk learning within that? How many hours of learning can I fit in a week? Does someone only have 90 minutes a week, an hour of a week? And in that 90 minutes, how long can each asset be? 5 minutes? 2 minutes long? How long can a video be? How long can a discussion be? How long can a mission be? Right? So we've got to respect time in that way. We've got to consider the user experience. How accessible is it? Can I access it on my phone? How long does it take to access it? Can I use single sign-on, right? To make sure that this is as easy as possible to respect their time. This is a logistics piece, right? Schedules and time zones. For a lot of clients, we'll run a live webinar, one at 9 a.m. and one at 3 p.m. or one on a Friday and a Monday, just in case people are on leave one week. They might be back the next week. We really think about that type of stuff. Factor in time for application. If your data tells you that learners only have 2 hours a week or 90 minutes a week to apply to whatever this topic is, well, that's got to also include time on the job. So if you've got a big on the job activity, you might want to lighten up the content for that week. And you got to sell it to them. You got to tell them in advance. Part of your marketing plan, right, needs to tell them, we're going to respect your time. Because most learners, what I said coming into this, they might have prior understanding or experiences that's informing their desire to participate in this. They're coming in thinking, oh, this is just like everything else I've ever experienced. No, you got to tell them in the kickoff, or somehow you got to get across to them that you don't have to be afraid of this. You're really going to be able to consume this in a way that makes it easy for you. So generating pull, this is probably where it all comes down. And the foundation of it is relevance, creating connections and respecting time is the foundation of generating pull. If you get any one of those wrong, right, then it's much harder to pull, right? But here we have design for change and adoption. So building in marketing upfront, communication plans, actually designing it to meet people where they are, their level of resistance helps to generate pull because it overcomes resistance. Definitely look at points in gamification. And I think earlier, Kwong Chan, you mentioned about gamification doesn't necessarily contribute. You're right, it's not a direct thing, but people use points as a means to track their progress. So we can say by the end of this week, you should have 1,300 points. And people actually use that to go, oh gosh, I haven't earned enough points. What am I missing? And it actually does drive them to take that action, to go back and record a video and tell us how that mission went. So it's an indirect piece, but when used strategically, it can help to drive retention because it drives continuous action. Design progress markers, achievements, badges, different pieces like that, all right, to give people progress. And what's interesting is we design points and badges to promote the culture that company wants to create. So let's say a company wants a social learning culture. We will actually design points and badges that are weighted towards that. In fact, one of my favorite badges is the top contributor or the guru badge. And there's no way to manually do this in Intrepid, but because we have a moderator in there looking at what's going on week in, week out, the moderator observes who are the people who are going in and not just asking questions, but responding to other learners and trying to help other learners grow, right? And so we've created a custom badge that we manually award to people who are really considered like guru or great contributors because we want to promote that type of behavior. Celebrate achievements in those Monday, Wednesday, Friday emails on the platform at the end of the experience. Celebrate what people have achieved. Share successes regularly. So when people hit something out of the park and really get the learning and go and apply it, go and promote that and communicate that. And I don't just mean in the experience. Create marketing efforts that promote it to all the future learners who are still questioning whether or not they need to sign up. A big part of generating pull is the moderator. I'm not going to lie. We've A/B tested the exact same design for 300 learners in 2 separate cohorts. One had a moderator, one didn't. And the one without a moderator had significantly lower engagement. Now, that's not a fair comparison because you can do things without a moderator. For example, you could replace a moderator with a chatbot, and we've had success that bridges that gap of no moderator. And that leadership expert is key. You can create champions, get learners from prior cohorts to become contributors to future cohorts as a development pathway, and build a playbook. Now, in the advertisement, you will have seen me mention about playbooks, right? We put all of this stuff, right? Here's just a fake playbook that we've just modified here into a playbook. And the playbook literally defines, what is this journey about? What are the key critical engagement factors? What are my responsibilities as a moderator or a leadership smear as an admin, day in, day out, week in, week out, as I moderate this platform? So it documents and defines the steps that we need to take to execute on what we've defined as being the delivery playbook to drive engagement, drive transfer, and drive retention, right? So here's a summary of the weeks that are going to go on. There's some sensitive stuff showing, what are the roles? So maybe we hand this over to a customer because they do it instead of us do it. So this one is designed for a customer. So we give much more definition on the roles of moderators and coaches and what are the different tiles you may see? What is a poll for, a discussion, a mission, a project in the platform? And then we give out the weekly responsibilities. And at the end, I'm going to come down. We even create email templates to make it easy to push out the Monday, Wednesday, Friday emails or messages on the platform. So they're all done in advance. So this is actually what a playbook is. And we find them to be great to help drive consistency, to help onboard people, to train our customers, but also to train our own people so we can continue to deliver consistently. So that's the playbook. And our last bit here is around collecting data. And then I'm going to pause for questions, okay? Track points as progress, right? Use points as a means of progress and use it as a means to communicate to people if they're behind and what extra actions might be required. Use measurement mapping. We had our last webinar on measurement mapping, but effectively it's defining the indicators of success. And they're not just indicators of learning outcomes occurring on the job, but they're also indicators that the design is working and your culture is there. How many people are commenting? How many people are not commenting? How many people are doing videos? You can set KPIs for those and then design to achieve them. And measurement mapping occurs in the design process. Track user activity. When are they coming in? When are they not coming in? How long are they spending? Are they sharing? What are they actually doing on the platform and when? That can help inform future designs. Pre and post surveys, confidence surveys. How well do you know this? How good are you at this? How confident are you with this now? And I'm going to do that again later and again 6 months the third time. A platform like Intrepid enables you to do level 3 Kirkpatrick tracking, which is about on the job, in real time. So because I have here a mission to go and have a conversation with your manager, I can actually get people to record a video or tell us how that conversation went. What were the actions? And so I don't have to wait till after the training. During the training, because it's spaced over time, people are coming back and saying, this happened, this worked, this didn't work. So we can actually see action on the job. All of this helps drive the relevance. And so the last thing I wanted to mention is just data should drive what actions you're taking as you're managing and delivering the experience, but also drive your responsiveness to the design. How quickly can I adapt and change this experience based on the data that I'm seeing? So guys, that's about it. And look, if you do this right, the benefits are huge. All right. I just want to ask you, tell me in the chat, this is called the forget curve, right? It's how quickly people respond. How long does it take for someone to lose 40%? So go from 100% immediate recall of knowledge to 60%. Tell me in the chat, how long does that take to get there in your opinion? Mark said 12 hours. Let's see if we've got some other responses. Nita said 15 minutes. I want to see if there's any other responses. Just tell me in the chat. For some people, if the learning isn't interesting or relevant, yeah, it's going to be 15 minutes. But yeah, it's somewhere in the vicinity of 6 to 12 hours. We generally lose 60%, and then after about 7 days, we can lose up to 90%. And so this approach to learning isn't just about COVID. It's about dealing with the forget curve, because the more I space things out, the more I engage in repetition, the more I come back to things, the more I'm able to reduce that forget curve over time. That's really what this is about. It's not about, designing learning for COVID or some stopgap emergency measure. It's about making our learning more effective. So let's pause there and let's have a quick check on the questions. I'm going to jump ahead here. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. Let me just bring that back up. Okay. Assuming, okay, so we've only got 2 questions in here, but we have got some questions in the chat. So if you've got any questions, you could put it in the chat, or you can, I don't know, Mavis, and can we unmute? Can people unmute? Or is it locked for mute? Zach and Mavis.
Zach, will you be able to check on that? So Ben, we do have a question from Wa Lao.
Yeah, I've seen that one. I'm going to address that one here. What I want to say, guys, all of this stuff that I showed you, just to finish a point here, what does that really take to execute on that? Well, I'll tell you, that journey that we're going to launch publicly for you to try to have a chance to experience. And by the way, everyone who attended this webinar will get a discounted rate. It's 10 hours a week from the moderator and about 6 to 8 hours a week from a trainer, if you want to design it like that, right? And then of course you've got some time in the setup and the admin, but you could have 300 learners go through that. And to execute on everything I've just said, you've got an upfront chunk in design to get it right from the start, of course, right? And that's why we built Career Now, so people didn't have to spend that money on designing it, because we've already put out what we think our best practice is. But it's 10 hours from the moderator a week, flexible, and about 6 to 8 hours per week of the SME to deliver on this, to track the gamification, to get the data. So I wanted to kind of take, yes, there was a lot of stuff I spoke about, but outside of the design side, actually delivering it is actually really manageable, and you can do it internally and you can lean on external partners to do it, but it's really accessible. So let me hit a couple of those questions. So while Al said, do you find any cultural differences in terms of how people respond to this design? Good question. I'd encourage everyone to participate, but our number one markets for customers participating in this have actually been organizations in Singapore, just because I spend a lot of time there. So we've had thousands of learners from 2 different banks go through different journeys for individual contributors, people managers, senior leaders. And the markets that have been addressed by experiences my team have designed have been in Indonesia, Singapore, Australia, China, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Taiwan, right? And so pretty interesting cultural mix there, right? From kind of more, I guess you could say, more kind of typical Western culture in Australia to an extent, and maybe more, Malay or Chinese or different cultures around that area. And I would say that I have to do more work on the engagement front. So the experience that we're going to run for that Career Now program in September is that would be based on the effort that we feel like is needed to engage a skeptical audience in Asia. I find, for example, if I'm running an experience just for Malaysia, just for Australia, people tend to jump on into the social side a little bit easier, and that's a cultural lens at play there, right? They're ready to jump in, because I think in many companies in, say, Singapore are very hierarchical and top down. That resistance to speak up, that resistance to jump into something self-directed is a bit higher. So I do more work in marketing, more work in change communication. And even, for example, in Australia, I will have a post and mission in the very first week, upload a video telling me how it went. But when I'm running these experiences for Asia, I won't have that until maybe week 3 or week 4, and I'll build up that, oh, this is okay, this is normal. I'll build that up a bit slower in Asia, so people have a bit more room to breathe and change to this new approach to learning. So there are some differences, Walao, and I hope A, I'm pronouncing your name right, and B, that I've answered your question. The next one, what can be done for retention of learning, say after 2 to 3 months? So number one, want something you were going to do in 2 days or half a day, space that learning out over time, because giving people space to focus on one aspect of learning. I already mentioned in this journey, just going to jump across right here. They've got a whole week to explore just the concept of community as part of a wider career program. We have a kind of classroom version of this journey, and it's half day to 1 day, right? But the reality is they're going boom, 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 boom through everything, and community is only one part of it. And so they're less likely to retain it. So number one, try to find a way to space the initial learning over time. Number two, find a tool for spaced repetition. And so some LXPs or platforms come with a built-in element of spaced repetition where they'll feed off, there'll be an AI algorithm, or you can manually create it, question banks on what learning has occurred. And then it'll pulse out a text message or a question to someone. Hey, what about this? And it'll remember, did you get it right or wrong? And it'll even come back to you in a different way a bit later. So that's a great way to drive retention, especially around knowledge-based things like product knowledge or compliance, this or that. And then the other way is if you don't have an LXP, there are platforms out there that just do repetition, like QStream, right? But QStream, you can add in, and it can do via mobile or via email. And it will just, you have to create a question bank, and it will pulse it out. So let's say I just have a classroom training. I don't want to drive spaced repetition. I can turn on QStream, and it'll just do the spaced repetition part and gamify it. But if you're going down that path, I'd ask that you grill us first, because we test and vet these technologies. And for example, QStream is of a certain price point. Is there something that might be at a similar or lower price point that does more than just spaced repetition? So hopefully I've answered your question there. They're the two main methods. And of course, on-the-job application, right? So finding a way to track and measure and drive application on the job. So Intrepid's very good at that. It's very good at giving me missions and activities that I've got to come back and report on, because action on the job is where that retention and transfer occurs. WK Lim has said, how do you overcome resistance in learners moving into this spacing approach versus condensed classroom training? Honestly, WK, if I'm really honest with you, mate, if I'm really honest with you, the number one change is actually the L&D team and the management, because there's a skepticism like that this will never work here. So our first protocol, and it's actually the hardest one, is to try to help people realize that it's actually learners are already busy. Learners are already consumed with work. Learners are already very discerning. Learners are already learning like this, like I'm showing you at home on Google and YouTube all the time, right? So learners are more ready than you would think to participate in this. That's what I would say is a first start, right? So I think L&D teams need to change their mindset first and expect more from their learners. But number two, have a kickoff, right? Do a virtual kickoff, 2 hours or an hour, where you integrate use of the platform, and you explain the spaced element, and you sell it to them, and you explain to them how it's for them, how we're designing around your schedules. We care about you. You sell it to them in the kickoff. You sell it to them in the marketing and communications beforehand, to try to reduce that resistance. But then you make sure once you've sold it to them, you've got to make sure people don't go, oh my God, they said it was respecting my time, but actually it's 5 hours a week. I don't have time for this. So you got to make sure you're respecting time, that you're being relevant, that you're creating connections, you're doing those fundamental things. And people will naturally say, hey, this isn't so bad. I get it. It makes sense. So hopefully I've kind of answered your question. There's a lot more to it than that. But that's how we do it. And the big answer is, I'd say L&D need a bigger push on the difference between classroom training versus spacing than the learners do. So guys, I think we're just past the top of the hour. Some of you have already had to drop off, but I hope this has been interesting for you. I promised you guys I would present a modern learning playbook, an experience playbook that talks about how we deliver it. I've done it very quickly, but I hope that you guys can see that at the core of a delivery playbook is that these aren't just platitudes: relevance, connections, respecting time, generating pool, collecting data. They are actual practices, and they can be brought to life, but they take design. You have to design for it, and then you need to make sure you deliver it, right? You execute on it through the delivery. And hopefully I've given you some tips, ideas, strategies to actually bring these 5 critical principles of modern learning design to life. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful week ahead or weekend ahead. I'm just going to say thanks in the
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.